In 1961, the cinema screens of the world exploded with the thunderous sound of artillery and the high stakes of impossible heroism. The film was the Guns of Navarone, a colossal war epic that did more than just entertain it, set the gold standard for the men on a mission genre with its gripping tale of a small band of Allied commandos sent to destroy two massive German radar-controlled guns on a Greek island. The movie became a phenomenon, celebrated for its tension, its scale, and its exploration of the moral ambiguity of war. It was not merely a commercial blockbuster, it was a cultural touchstone that etched itself into the memories of a generation. However, behind the uniforms, the grease paint, and the heroic facades of these classic characters lay a cast of actors whose real lives were often more dramatic, tragic, and complex than the script they performed. Decades have passed since they stormed the cliffs of Navarone. Time has carved its own, unique scars into their biographies. Some ascended to the pantheon of legends, living long lives of acclaim, while others faced crushing heartbreaks, addiction, and solitary ends. As we revisit this cinematic masterpiece, let us look past the characters and honor the turbulent human journeys of the actors who gave the Guns of Navarone its immortal soul. Anthony Quinn as Colonel Andrea Stavros. In The Guns of Navarone, Colonel Andrea Stavros stands as the beating heart of the Greek resistance portrayed by the indomitable Anthony Quinn. Stavros is a man etched in granite, a fierce fighter, bound by a blood oath, struggling with the profound duality of duty and vengeance. At 46 years old, Quinn didn't just play the role, he inhabited it, bringing a raw, earthy charisma that captured the brutality of war and the resilience of the human spirit. His performance remains one of the most powerful depictions of a partisan soldier in film history, reflecting a man who carries the weight of his country on his shoulders. Born Manuel Antonio Rodolfo Quinn in Mexico, Anthony Quinn's real life was a whirlwind of passion, creativity, and profound sorrow that rivaled any Greek tragedy. He was a man of insatiable appetites, not just for acting, but for art, women, and life itself. Yet beneath the machismo and the larger-than-life persona lay a father's shattered heart. The sudden horrific death of his eldest son, Christopher, who drowned in a neighbor's pond at the age of 2, left a psychological wound that Quinn carried forever. It was a grief that perhaps fueled the intense pain visible in his character's eyes. His personal life was equally tempestuous. His marriage to Catherine DeMille, the daughter of a Hollywood legend, crumbled under the weight of his serial infidelity, ending after nearly 30 years. Quinn's search for love and meaning seemed endless. He embarked on a secret decades-long affair with Jolanda Adalori, creating a second family in the shadows. Yet even this relationship was marred by his wandering eye. He fathered children with secretaries and producers, living a chaotic existence that often spilled into the public eye. In his 80s, he shocked the world by starting yet another family with his former secretary, Catherine Benvin, proving that his thirst for life refused to wane with age. He was a man who tried to fill the void of his early loss with creation, painting, sculpting, and writing, and with a sprawling, complicated family legacy. Despite his fiery temper, which often terrified directors and disrupted sets, he remained a revered figure, a 2-time Oscar winner whose presence was irreplaceable. However, even the most vibrant fires must eventually burn out. On June 3, 2001 in Boston, the journey of this screen titan came to a close, after a long, grueling battle with throat cancer and respiratory failure. Anthony Quinn passed away at the age of 86. He did not seek a grand monument in death. Instead, he chose to be laid to rest in the quiet earth of his Rhode Island garden beneath the branches of a century-old maple tree where he had spent his twilight years painting the sunset. Gregory Peck as Captain Keith Mallory. Gregory Peck, with his chiseled jaw and authoritative baritone, was the undisputed moral compass of the Guns of Navarone. As Captain Keith Mallory, the world-renowned mountaineer tasked with the impossible climb, Peck exuded a calm, calculating leadership. At 45, he portrayed Mallory not as a fearless Superman, but as a man bearing the invisible, crushing weight of command. His portrayal cemented his image as the steadfast hero, a man of unparalleled emotional depth who could navigate the treacherous cliffs of war with dignity. To the audience, he was invincible, the stoic rock upon which the mission relied. But peel back the layers of Hollywood glamour and you find a man whose life was quietly steeped in suffering. Peck was the master of maintaining a dignified exterior, a trait he perfected while hiding a tumultuous private life. His first marriage to Greta Kukkonen, a gentle soul, slowly disintegrated over a decade with whispers of an affair with Ingrid Bergman haunting the union. While Peck maintained a gentlemanly silence, letters and industry gossip suggest an emotional incompatibility that quietly eroded his domestic happiness. He eventually found love again, but the universe had a far darker trial in store for him. In 1975, Peck faced every parent's worst nightmare. His eldest son, Jonathan, took his own life at the age of 30. The tragedy shattered Peck. The man, who was the symbol of strength on screen, became a ghost in his own home. Withdrawing emotionally from friends and his surviving children, he spent hours staring into space, battling insomnia and obsession, famously stating that one never gets over such pain, but merely learns to live in the silence of it. This trauma changed him on set. He became protective of his image, demanding cuts of scenes that showed weakness, perhaps because he felt too fragile in reality. To the world, he remained the beloved Atticus Finch, the ultimate figure of justice. He worked hard, investing wisely, and amassing a fortune. But the sorrow of his sons. Death was a shadow that never lifted. His long and illustrious journey finally ended peacefully on June 12, 2003. Gregory Peck passed away in his sleep from pneumonia at the age of 87. At his funeral, the most touching tribute came not from a studio head but from Brock Peters, the actor he defended in To Kill a Mockingbird, a testament to the quiet, enduring decency of a man who carried his grief with the same dignity he brought to the screen. David Niven as Corporal John Anthony Miller. In the tense ensemble of Navarone, David Niven provided the necessary spark of wit and cynicism as Corporal John Anthony Miller. At 51, Niven played the explosives expert with nerves of steel and a sharp tongue, a character who questioned authority but possessed a brilliant mind. His performance brought a refined elegance to the grit of the commando raid, his charm serving as a light in the film's darker moments. He seemed the quintessential English gentleman, unflappable, humorous, and effortlessly cool. Yet the real David Niven was a man whose charm was a shield forged in the fires of loss. Orphaned by the First World War when his father was killed, he was raised by a harsh stepfather, leading to a rebellious youth. He was a true soldier before he was an actor, serving in the British Army and later rejoining as a commando during World War II, witnessing horrors he rarely spoke of. But his greatest war wound was emotional. In 1946, at the height of his happiness, his young wife, Primula Rollo, died in a freak accident falling down a flight of stairs during a game of hide and seek. The suddenness of the tragedy broke him, though he remarried and continued to work. Friends, set a part of Niven's heart, remained forever buried with his first love. He masked this deep melancholy with the persona of the raconteur, the life of the party who could spin a story to entertain anyone. But as he entered his twilight years, fate dealt him a cruel physical blow. In the early 1980s, the man known for his beautiful speaking voice began to slur his words. He was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. It was a humiliating and painful decline for a man of such dignity. The disease slowly robbed him of his mobility and his legendary voice, trapping a brilliant mind inside a failing body. Despite the ravages of the illness, he tried to remain cheerful for those around him, flashing his signature smile. Even as his strength faded, the final curtain fell on July 29, 1983. At his chalet in Switzerland, David Niven passed away at the age of 73. He left behind a modest fortune but a massive legacy of grace under pressure, remembered as a man who laughed in the face of tragedy until the very end. Irene Papas as Maria Papademos. Amidst a cast dominated by men, Irene Papas stood tall as Maria Papademos, the fierce and courageous resistance fighter. At 32, the Greek actress brought a raw, earthy intensity to the role. She was not merely a love interest, she was a warrior embodying the resilience of a nation under occupation. Her performance was a masterclass in understated power, her expressive eyes conveying a history of violence and a determination to survive. To the international audience, she became the face of Greek tragedy, stoic, beautiful, and profoundly strong. But beneath the cinematic radiance lay a life marked by solitude and hidden scars. Born in Corinth, Irene's upbringing was strict and traditional. The tender age of 18, she was forced into a marriage with a man 30 years her senior, a union that ended quickly, but left her with a lifelong skepticism of the institution. She chose a path of independence that was rare for women of her time, never remarrying and keeping her private life guarded. While rumors swirled of romances with titans like Marlon Brando, she ultimately chose a quiet, almost ascetic existence, dedicating herself to her art. Her career was illustrious, spanning classics like Zorba the Greek and the Trojan Women, where she often played characters doomed by fate, roles that strangely mirrored the melancholy of her own solitary life. As she aged, the woman who was once the symbol of sharp intellect and memory began to fade into the fog of dementia. In 2013, it was revealed she had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. She withdrew completely from the public eye, cutting ties with old friends and refusing to let the world see her decline. For years, she lived in the shadows of her own mind, cared for by her niece. The end of her long, silent struggle came on September 14, 2022. Irene Papas passed away in Athens at the age of 93. She was laid to rest in a private ceremony near the village of her childhood, leaving behind a legacy as one of the most powerful actresses of the 20th century. A woman who lived and died with the dignity of the Greek heroines she so often portrayed. Anthony Quayle as Major Roy Franklin. Sir Anthony Quayle brought a heartbreaking nobility to the role of Major Roy Franklin. At 48, he played the missions leader who, after a debilitating leg injury, becomes a liability to the men he commands. Quayle's performance was a study in physical and emotional pain, capturing the agony of a man whose body has failed his indomitable will. The character's sense of duty and inner dignity were not just acting, they were reflections of Quayle's true self, a man of deep integrity and seriousness. Off-screen, Quayle was the pillar of the British theater, a man who prioritized his craft above celebrity. He was married to actress Dorothy Hyson for over 40 years, a union that appeared rock solid to the public. However, whispers in the theater world suggested a more complex reality, with rumors of extramarital affairs and a hidden struggle with his own identity. Despite having a family, he was often described as aloof, a man who retreated into his work to avoid the emotional entanglements of home life. He was a private soul, keeping his inner world tightly locked away behind a facade of professional courtesy. In his later years, the knighthood he received in 1985 validated his career, but it could not shield him from the darkness of depression. Family members recounted how he would retreat to his study, writing fictional stories based on his own wartime memories, stories that were perhaps a way to process the trauma he carried. As he approached the end of his life, he was diagnosed with liver cancer. True to his stoic nature, he refused aggressive long-term treatment, seemingly accepting his fate with the quiet resolve of a soldier. On October 20th, 1989, at his home in Chelsea, Anthony Quayle's watch ended. He passed away at the age of 76. He left a modest fortune, but his true bequest was a lifetime of artistic integrity. He was a man who played heroes and kings, yet lived a life of quiet introspection, taking his deepest secrets with him to the grave. James Darren, as Spiros Papademos. The youngest member of the team, Spiros Papademos, was played by the American heartthrob, James Darren. At 25, Darren was known as a teen idol, the singing star of the Gidget movies. In Navarone, he played the hot-headed killer who ultimately sacrifices his life for the mission. His death scene was one of the film's most emotional moments, symbolizing the loss of youth and innocence in the grinder of war. For James, Darren life was a struggle to break free from the pretty boy image that made him famous. He often felt like a fraud, a serious actor trapped. "In the body of a teen pop star, I just sing, so people don't forget me," he once admitted. His personal life was complicated. His first marriage collapsed, quickly leaving a rift with his son that took decades to heal. However, unlike many of his tragic co-stars, Darren found a way to stabilize. He remarried, built a strong family, and reinvented himself as a successful television director and a crooner who embraced his past rather than running from it. He lived a long, full life, far outlasting the other members of the Navarone squad. He became the keeper of the memories, the last living link to the legendary production. But time is the one adversary that cannot be defeated. On September 2nd, 2024, the final member of the team laid down his arms. James Darren passed away in his sleep at the age of 88, succumbing to heart failure. With his death, the book finally closed on the cast of the Guns of Navarone. He left this world peacefully, a man who had survived the perils of early fame to find contentment in his golden years. Gia Scala as Anna. Gia Scala played Anna, the mute resistance fighter whose silence spoke volumes. At 27, Gia was breathtaking, her dark eyes conveying a haunting mix of trauma and resilience. Though she had few lines, her presence was undeniable, serving as a poignant symbol of the innocent lives shattered by war. She seemed poised for international stardom, a beauty who could rival the screen legends of her time. But Gia Scala's life was a tragedy that unfolded in slow motion. Born in Liverpool and raised in Sicily, she was thrust into the Hollywood machine at a young age, forced to change her name and her appearance to fit a studio mold. The pressure was immense. The death of her beloved mother in 1957 shattered her fragile emotional state, and a subsequent breakup with Steve McQueen sent her spiraling into depression. She sought solace in a marriage to actor Don Burnett, but the relationship was volatile, marked by rumors of abuse and a traumatic miscarriage that pushed her over the edge. By the mid-1960s, Gia was drowning in addiction to alcohol and tranquilizers. Her career evaporated as her behavior became erratic. She was fired from roles and arrested for public drunkenness. The industry that had chewed her up now spat her out. She retreated to a crumbling home in the Hollywood Hills, living as a recluse, surrounded by empty bottles and the ghosts of her potential. On the night of April 30th, 1972, the silence that defined her character in Navarone claimed her permanently. Gia Scala was found dead in her bedroom, the victim of an accidental overdose of alcohol and barbiturates. She was only 38 years old. She died alone with no suicide note, leaving behind a fortune of zero. It was a heartbreaking finale for a woman who had crossed oceans to find a dream, only to find a nightmare. James Robertson Justice as Rear Admiral Jensen. With a voice like rolling thunder and a beard like a Viking king, James Robertson Justice commanded every scene he was in. As Rear Admiral Jensen, the mastermind behind the Navarone mission, he exuded intelligence and authority. At 54, he was the perfect figure of the British, upper crust, witty, imposing, and seemingly born to rule. To the public, he was the eccentric Scottish aristocrat, a man of falcons and fast cars. However, this persona was largely a magnificent fabrication. Born in London to working-class parents, Justice spent his life constructing a myth to hide his origins. He invented stories of foreign wars and aristocratic lineage, perhaps to cover a deep-seated insecurity or a profound pain. That pain was real and devastating. In 1949, his only son died at the tender age of 4. The loss destroyed him. Beneath the booming laughter and the flamboyant lifestyle lay a man drowning in grief. He turned to alcohol and anger, driving away his wife Dilys after decades of unhappiness. His later years were a tragic descent. A series of strokes beginning in 1968 stripped him of his vitality and his ability to work. His extravagant spending caught up with him, and in 1970, the man who played lords and admirals was declared bankrupt. He lost everything: his home, his fortune, and his standing. He spent his final days in a haze of illness and poverty, reliant on charity and the few friends who remained. Even his final marriage, just 3 days before his death, was viewed by many as a sad, desperate act. On July 2, 1975, James Robertson Justice passed away at the age of 68, penniless and broken. His ashes were scattered in a field in Scotland, the land he claimed as home, but to which he had no true birthright. It was a lonely end for a man who had spent a lifetime pretending to be larger than life, only to be crushed by the very harsh realities he tried to escape. Richard Harris as Squadron Leader Barnsby. Richard Harris burst onto the screen in the Guns of Navarone as the Australian pilot Squadron Leader Barnsby. Though his role was smaller than the leads, Harris brought an electric, dangerous energy to the screen. At 31, the Irish actor was a force of nature, fearless, rebellious, and brimming, with a raw talent that demanded attention. His character's stubbornness mirrored Harris's real-life reputation as a hellraiser who refused to play by the rules. Harris's career was a roller coaster of immense highs and destructive lows. He became a superstar with This Sporting Life and a chart-topping singer, but his off-screen antics were legendary. He was a notorious drinker, a brawler who tore apart film sets and marriages with equal reckless abandon. His turbulent lifestyle cost him his marriage to Elizabeth Reese Williams and estranged him from the industry for years. Yet Harris was a phoenix. He sobered up, reinvented himself, and found a new generation of fans as Dumbledore in the Harry Potter films, bringing a gentle wisdom that contrasted with his wild youth. In his final years, however, his health began to fail. In 2002, he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. True to his defiant spirit, he reportedly joked about his condition and refused to let it dampen his resolve to finish his work. He faced death with the same swagger he had carried through life. On October 25, 2002, surrounded by his family at a London hospital, Richard Harris passed away at the age of 72. He had refused chemotherapy, choosing to go out on his own terms. He left behind a legacy of brilliant performances and wild stories. A man who had lived enough for 10 lifetimes and burned the candle at both ends until the very last spark.